Hey there everyone, what's up? Back today with another impressions video, and today we're going to be talking about a PSP game. This game is Zettai Zetsumei Toshi 3, and this is actually 1 and 2. The first one is released on the PS2, and the second is on the PSP. No, PS2 also, sorry. But those two games were actually released in English. So the first game, you might recognize them. The first game is Disaster Report on the PS2, and the second game is Raw Danger. But this is the third game in that series, and Zettai Zetsumei Toshi is a series that's based on kind of disaster simulation, and not like a incredibly realistic disaster situation, but somewhat realistic disaster situation. So what will happen is like some giant unbelievable disaster will occur, and then you're trying to survive, and then like in that in that case it's like the worst case scenario for any type of disaster that's occurring, and that's essentially the game. And that's pretty much all of them, actually, though they're usually a different disaster in each game. But this game, the third game, is about a giant earthquake plus some other stuff, but I'll get into that. But the main thing is a giant earthquake, and you're kind of a survivor on an island, like a kind of city island, and you're just trying to get off the island before it slides off into the ocean. And it's actually like there's a plot point as to why that's happening, but I won't really get into it. But there's a lot of disasters that are occurring, including the earthquakes and aftershocks. So this game is essentially that. You're a character and you're tasked with not dying. So first, we'll talk about what it looks like. I mean, it looks like a PSP game. There's not, it doesn't look like a particularly well-detailed PSP game. It looks, passable for a PSP game. And, it doesn't really have to be great. I think, like, this isn't the type of game that relies on its graphics. So, it's the kind of game that relies on its concept, and I think it does well with that. So mostly the environments you're in are a city environment, a disaster city environment. So there's lots of crumbling buildings and areas blocked off by debris, and it's mostly a city environment. So it's not like incredibly colorful or varied in many ways. It's just lots of buildings, lots of streets, lots of things like that, like underground malls and things like that. It's not incredibly varied. So, and it's a little bland because the city, it's just this plain kind of city. And, normally you'd think like, well, they could have done something with that, but really there's not much you can do with that. It's kind of like you've got greenery in some areas and greenery not in some areas, and different types of crushed buildings and things. There's kind of, not a whole lot you can do. So it doesn't look incredibly great, and the environments are alright. They do what they're supposed to do, but they don't I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens actually in the environments. The environments are kind of dynamic, so sometimes they'll change when you're running through the stages. Like you'll hit some point and the something will crumble away, or a big sinkhole will open or something, and you have all these things that are happening like that. So it's pretty interesting. And what'll happen is, like, the game itself does give you actual disaster information. So it's helpful in the sense that, like, if you were in one of these bizarre situations, which are like worst case situation disaster situations, you would have kind of a bit of a knowledge of what you're supposed to be doing in these kind of situations. I think I said situations are like 30 times. Whatever. The general idea of this, though, is that you come across some kind of horror event, and you start off pretty badly. Like, the earthquake happens when you're in a tunnel under a channel going to this island. So, like, you have to worry about your bus flips over and stuff, and you have to worry about getting out of the tunnel before it collapses. And what'll happen is every time like some kind of a disaster happens, a little message will come up, and you'll get like a little manual to read regarding the situation. So like, if an earthquake occurs and you're in this kind of situation, this is what you should do. So it helps you play the game, but it works like kind of like a tutorial for the game, but it also works as a tutorial for surviving a disaster, which is actually pretty neat. Um, though a lot of the disasters are things like almost nobody will even see in their life, never mind like have to survive. So, but again, I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. Um, but generally, you're running through the game as what your main character, and you have usually one or two characters with you that are uh, people you meet along the way. And you'd think like, oh, it's like like a mission where you have to protect these people, but it's actually not. They kind of do everything by themselves, and I don't think they can take damage or fall off of anything either. So it's not so bad. Like, you don't have to really worry about them. All you have to do is worry about yourself. And like that's there's a little bit about that that's a little strange, because sometimes like it'll be raining and you'll have an umbrella and you'll think like, well, I should give my partner the umbrella because you know she's been through so much more than I have. And then you think like, and you don't have the option. You just can't. So that your partner is always like in the rain or like in some kind of element, running through fire or whatever, not taking damage. So it's a little unrealistic in that sense, but I guess as a game, it's better that way because you don't want to do like a full game escort mission through disasters. And you'll know. I'll talk a little more about why you definitely don't want to do that in this game. But yeah, so generally you run through the town and you find items all over the place. So you'll get food and water and things like energy drinks and things like that, and you'll get like little messages telling you like what kind of stuff you should be looking for in a disaster situation. So like you should get these like calorie mate things that are like have a lot of vitamins, and they're light and they have a bit of calories, so they're kind of helpful to have. And then like water and types of medicine and stuff you should be keeping track of. It's pretty like practical in that sense. But then you you run through and there's like stuff that's totally not practical. So like you'll find clothes all over the place and you pick them up, and there's always like these weird outfits, and you can get all these like bizarre outfits. So you can get like surfer dude outfit, or you can get biker, or bright fluorescent pink suit or whatever, and you can just change throughout the game. Like there's sections where like you're being chased by people, and you'll find clothes, and you can just change in the middle of the thing. Stops, and you change your clothes, and then you continue running. So it's not like realistic in a lot of cases with that, with the goofy stuff at least. And you have a compass also, and the needle of the compass can be changed to all types of bizarre things. So like normally it starts out as a needle, and then you can switch it to like a little disco guy pointing off to the direction, or it'll be like a little pot blowing steam in the direction of that the compass is facing. There's tons of them though. There's so many weird ones too. So those are just kind of collectibles that are fun. They don't really affect any of the gameplay. But you can also build your own items out of stuff you find. So like for example, you can find a hard hat, and then you can like find some tape and a lamp, and you can kind of combine them into like a helmet with a lamp. So you don't have to carry the lamp anymore, and that's pretty helpful. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of that though. It's kind of like a little bit of a wasted opportunity, because there is some stuff you can build, but the stuff you can build is not incredibly useful, and some of it you can find anyway. So it makes it like less of a necessity to build these things. But let me try and think about. There are a few characters you meet in the game. There is a kind of convoluted story that's happening, but it's like a sub story to the main story for the most part, because the main story is essentially you and the girl you meet when you're escaping the tunnel right in the beginning are trying to get to the off the island. That's like the main story, but you meet some people when there's like this bizarre kind of murder mystery drama thing going on throughout it, and it's not like incredibly interesting. So the story isn't like, it seems kind of tacked on in that sense, because there is a kind of weird twist ending that is like out of nowhere, and but it is there's no hints. Like, it's not like this kind of story element comes out and there's like, oh yeah, that's what they were leading up to. It's more like, what? Huh? Okay, well, I guess I'll just accept that and move on with the game, but okay. So that part was a little weird, but you do have two main girls that you are with in this game, and apparently you can get into relationships with them if you try. But I always thought like the relationship building, you have a lot of situations where you're having conversations. You have to choose your what you're gonna say, and the relationship ones that are obviously like you hitting on them are all creepy sounding. So I felt like I don't want to select any of those, so I never did, and I never actually did the relationship thing in the game. But I did do a lot of you know changing my clothes and compass, so I guess there's that. But beyond that, there are some problems with the game that you know were a little frustrating. So sometimes, like, you can free move the camera sometimes, but not all the time. And there were points in the game where it was like the game was challenging, but challenging not because it was difficult, but challenging because like you had to make blind jumps because you couldn't move the camera in some like there's like a final part in the game where you're running up stairs that are crumbling. So like the stairs are like slowly crumbling, so you have to run up and kind of jump over chasms to the next staircase and stuff. But like what happens is every time you get to the jump, you can't move the camera and you can't see where you're jumping until after you've jumped. So it's always a blind jump unless you memorize where you're going, which is kind of a bad design. Um, and some of them, like, it gets tricky where like you have to do a double jump and there's like no way you could know it before you get there, because you can't like stop and look around when you get there, because the stairs will crumble under you. So it's like you have to keep going and going as quick as you can, but you can't like actually look where you're going, which is unrealistic because the character himself would be able to see where he's jumping, but you can't because you're like in this weird position with the camera. So that was like a little bit of an annoyance. But there are, choices you have to make in the game also, where you have to be like, saving people or saving food, or, helping some people over other people, which is a pretty cool element. And they do a good job of like having this society kind of break down after a couple of days on the island. It so that's also pretty interesting. Overall, I think this series is a good series. This game is actually now, this is the last game in the series, and it doesn't have an English release, and it's kind of rare. It's one of the last IREM games before IREM stopped making games, and all of those games are getting really expensive now. And I figured I'd get this because I want to play it. I wanted to play it because I like the other games, but the price has been going up and up, so I like quickly bought it for probably too much money. And it's not the best game in the series, actually. It's probably it might be the worst game in the series, or at least like probably on par with Raw Danger. The first game in the series is probably the best. There was a canceled fourth game in the series. It was supposed to be another earthquake story, another disaster in Tokyo, I believe, on the PS3. And the game was completed and was supposed to come out 1 week after the earthquake that happened in Japan a couple years back, and so of course, like, the earthquake happened, and then they just canceled the game. They were just like, no, we can't release this because it's too insensitive after the earthquake had just killed thousands of people, and so the game got canceled. It was done. It got canceled like literally. I think it was like almost like a week or two, or maybe a month at the most after the release. I mean, before the release. So the game was completed. The creator said it was completed, but he doesn't know what happened to it after it got canceled. So it's probably lost forever, which is a disappointment because there are trailers for it online you can see that are pretty interesting. It looks like a pretty good game in the series. So overall, this game, well, it's fun. I like the concept and I like playing this series, but if you can get Disaster Report on the PS2, because that's a better one, but this game is still fun for what it is. And it does do like a kind of interesting disaster thing. I think I actually learned a bunch of stuff, um, survival stuff from this game that is pretty interesting, like stuff to do in an earthquake, which is actually helpful for me since I live in an earthquake zone. But there are, like I said, there were a lot of disasters in the game that I'm never gonna have a chance to see. Like there was like a fire tornado. Those happen. It's just like so rare. Like when is that gonna happen to me? But if I happen to be in a fire tornado, I totally know what to do now. So I guess thanks Zettai Zetsumei Toshi 3 for that. But otherwise, this game is a bit on the expensive side right now, and you could, if unless you're like a huge IREM fan like I am, you could probably pass on it. And just go for just go for Disaster Report. I think that's probably cheaper. So yeah, that's about it. So I guess I will see you guys next time.